thought I'd do, if anybody wants to watch a quick demo, I'll do a little bit of a recap on colour mixing and a little bit of nice, so I'll do that in just a bit. And just to remind you that there isn't a class next week, so I've got a 1 week break next week. So I'm going to be taking part in the Wapping Group exhibition up in London. So if any of you want to come along, hopefully we've got details in the emails, but there's a little bit of information there if you want to check it out. And I brought this is I brought this one on. This is one of the paintings that I'm going to put in the exhibition. So I'll pop that in the frame tonight, and then that'll be one of the ones that goes. So the exhibition starts on Friday, so we're going to put it up on Thursday, and that'll be one of the ones that goes into it. So this was the Strand, which is the Strand that I finished earlier in the year. Okay. That's that. Just wanted to mention a little bit about colour mixing. So a very quick recap for anybody that's not sort of seeing me talk about colour mixing. I tend to use, or I think it's a really good idea if you're starting out painting or relatively inexperienced, to start out with a fairly limited palette. So a couple of the primary colours. So the primaries are the colours you can't really mix. You can't, like yellows and reds and blues. So I usually have two versions of each of those and some white and a brown. And I think if you're starting out, that's a really good place to start out with colour. And then, as you get into it more, after a few paintings, add a few other colours in. The ideas that I got, to use this was from this book. So it's a colour mixing theory book that when I first started teaching, I read this because I wasn't quite sure what were the best colours to recommend really. I'd been to art school and used lots of different colours in my time, so I kind of got used to using lots. So I thought just to pare it down. And the basic idea was that you have two each of the primaries, and that each of the primaries you'll find has got a little bit of a bias towards one of the secondary colours. So the secondaries are the colours that you can mix, so things like the greens, the oranges and the purples. So for instance, if you've got like a slightly purpley red and a slightly purpley blue, you'll get a nice strong purple. If you've got more of an orangey red and more of a green blue, then you'll find that the mixes tend to be a bit duller. Maybe they'll look a bit purpley or they'll look more like brown. So that's kind of the basis of it. If you want a very strong green, a greeny yellow and a greeny blue will give you a strong green. If you wanted a more kind of earthy, maybe late autumn green, perhaps an orangey yellow and a purple blue. That's the basic idea of what you're using. So I usually, when people are starting colour mixing, I usually suggest that you create a colour wheel and then maybe do some of these colour charts. So this is an example of what I was talking about there with greens. A really bright greeny yellow and a greeny blue will give you this range of greens, which are in the kind of brighter range. And then if you went for an orangey yellow and a more purple blue, you get a lot more muted range of greens. So it kind of depends on what sort of green you're after. So having these, all these colours here out and then doing a couple of these charts is a great way, if you're not confident with colour mixing, which I know some of you are very confident, some of you are not so. This is quite a good exercise to go through. And then in application, I find that, so far I've been using this kind of night scene to do as a demo, and then just seeing if I could do that with the colours I've got there. So I would start off probably in the background. I'll do a little bit on this side now. So the sky, to me, it's got more of a slightly orangey feel as a yellow. So if I use the cadmium yellow, which has got a slightly orangey feel to it, and then add some white to that. Just do that with a knife. Just pop a bit of that in. Again, sometimes it's quite good to mix colours with a knife. You get a bigger quantity mixed if you're using acrylics or oils. So just kind of working into this area, that gives me a good sort of background, very pale yellowy colour going there. And then towards the horizon and the trees, it's a little bit more orangey. So I'll add a little bit of red in with that. So that's a little bit of crimson or magenta. They're a nice, quite like those for making an orange. I actually find in practice that the lemon yellow, the kind of greeny yellow, I don't actually find that much useful. So I tend to use the orangey yellows a lot more. So just mix some of that in, blend a little bit of that in, a little bit like that, and some of that can go into here as well. And then working my way across, a little bit more of this in here, into the sky. For me, more lilac-y, purpley colours. So if I just get a fresh brush, make a lilac colour out of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. So purpley blues and purpley reds. And it gets me something a bit like that, slightly lilac-y, pinky colour. This is oils, water mixable oils, so it'll blend in very nicely, very easily. I don't have to worry about the paint drying too quickly. This bit off the top is a bit bluer, add a little bit more blue. And again, if it's looking too strong a blue, that's not too bad. Quite like that. But I could add a little bit of yellow or brown just to desaturate it. So I don't want it to go too green, but I just want to make it greyed down a little bit. So that's where sometimes a little bit of brown's handy. Just make that a little bit greyer in places. And a little bit of white. So being oils, this will stay wet. So things like the trees are going to be a little bit more difficult to pop those over the top. If I just kind of really scrub the paint in like that, I can get the paint onto the board. I can probably still get some more darker colours over the top. So it's either that or wait for the paint to dry and then pop these details on over the top. So I'll go in with so to make a really dark colour, I basically just mix all the dark colours together. So something like the dark red, there's some crimson, a little bit of the blue, the dark blue, the purpley blue, ultramarine, and a bit of brown. They're all the darkest colours I've got on my palette. And I can get that sort of darkness, it's a kind of darkish, purpley browny colour, which I think will be fine for this. I think when sometimes photographs will make the contrasts a little bit stronger. If I was there, I think I'd see more colour than I can see in the photograph. I just know that from experience of painting outdoors. You will see a little bit of definition. So I'm reluctant to make things too black. So something like that for the ground. If I put the water in, well, I'll do a little bit of that over the top anyway. You could just ideally have the water in first, but you could do something like that, just sort of a little bit of dry brush work, just to suggest the reflections of the trees. With these, you've either got a choice of getting very tiny brushes out and trying to get the details in. I'm just seeing what I've got there, if I've got anything. Something like one of these very thin rigger brushes, you could make some very fine marks if you wanted to. And I think they're quite nice perhaps for the tree trunks. But all this stuff at the top, I think that's going to be a little bit too, I can't see the details that well, so I'll probably do something like that for the tree trunks. And maybe add a little bit of the colour in, the warm colours too. Just warm it up a bit. That looks a bit more like sunsets or nocturnes then. Probably just go for a slightly bigger brush, perhaps something like that. And just get a bit of paint on the side of the brush. And just try and almost like just suggest with some slightly impressionistic marks that we've got some twigs and branches there. So that's probably how I go about a little bit darker in places. Obviously, if that goes wrong, I've got to wipe that out, repaint the sky, and then have another go. That's one of the joys of what they call alla prima painting, painting on session. But it is, you know, more or less the way I tend to paint, just because of working outdoors. Yeah, so that's how I basically go about that. Just a limited palette to each of the colours of the primary colours, of brown and the white.
Okay.
Yeah. If anybody has used that one,